Welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll Travelogue. I'm your host, Buddy Bob, and we're seeking out the musical acts of the 1950s to 1990s. Many of them are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but not all. We don't do a deep dive. We're just on the road taking a look at as many of the artists as we can find, and many of these acts you know about. We're going to take a long drive now. We were in Minneapolis in the last episode, and we're heading down to St. Louis, Missouri. I love trivia of all kinds, and I especially like the out-of-left-field stories. And I've got one here. In suburban St. Louis, we find one of those stories. This is about a young woman born in a small farm town in southeast Missouri, near the Arkansas border. Kennett, Missouri is the town. This young woman went to the University of Missouri, and upon graduation, she got a job here in 1984 as a music teacher at Callison Elementary School in Fenton, Missouri, outside St. Louis. And by 1987, she was a backup vocalist for Michael Jackson on his Bad World Tour. And the rest is history. Well, a big thanks to the office staff at Callison Elementary for providing me this old newspaper article of Sheryl Crow. The 90s were big for Who Can Forget All I Want to Do in 1994. The song won a Grammy for Record of the Year, Best Female Pop Vocal. This ain't no disco, ain't no country club, this is L.A. What a great song. Sheryl Crow co-wrote the song, which went to number one. If It Makes You Happy and Every Day is a Winding Road followed. Well, that's Sheryl Crow. Time now to head into St. Louis, into the city, and Delmar Avenue at University City. This is where the St. Louis Walk of Fame, with stars and bronze plaques on the sidewalk, sit. Over 150 of them, from sports heroes to comedians to musicians, actors Buddy Ebsen, Dick Gregory, Vincent Price, more recently John Hamm, actress Shelley Winters, poet Maya Angelou, Charles Lindbergh, too. But the biggest musical star from St. Louis is Chuck Berry. Before we get to Chuck, let's look at some of the other notables. This is Fontella Bass. She had a hit in the mid-'60s called Rescue Me. Ike Turner has a star. He, of course, is from Mississippi. More on him in a few moments. Dennis Edwards, who was one of the lead singers of Motown's Temptations in the late 1960s. And The Fifth Dimension was led by St. Louis native Billy Davis. He eventually married the female lead singer Marilyn McCoo. The Fifth Dimension had a top 10 record, their first one in 1967, called Up, Up and Away. Sunshine Pop was the genre, and that song's been covered many, many times. They had two number ones. 1969, they had Aquarius, Let the Sunshine In, and also Wedding Bell Blues that year. Now, here's your host with the members of the Fifth Dimension, including Marilyn on my right and her husband Billy on her right. In the mid-'70s, Billy and Marilyn were a duo. They had a number one song with You Don't Have to Be a Star to Be in My Show. Billy Davis went to the same high school as Chuck Berry, Sumner High School in St. Louis. Here it is at 4248 Cottage Avenue. You see the stone sign on the steps of the school telling us that it was the only black high school in St. Louis until 1927. In fact, it was the first black high school west of the Mississippi River. Look at the other famous grads of Sumner High School. Robert Guillaume, the terrific actor. Also see Robert McFerrin, who was the first black man to sing at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And by the way, he's the father of Bobby McFerrin Jr., who had the unforgettable Don't Worry, Be Happy in 1988. Well, one other famous grad is not listed anywhere on this sign. Perhaps that's because she'd gone to school in Tennessee before coming to Sumner for her senior year. That young girl was Anna Mae Bullock, who would soon become Tina Turner. More on her and her husband Ike later in this Rock and Roll Travelogue episode. Well, around the corner from Sumner High School is 3137 Whittier Street, where Chuck Berry lived. I stopped by to take a picture, and a woman came out of the house next door. I said, good morning, and I said, just taking a picture of Chuck Berry's house. And she said, you and everybody else. And I had to laugh. The house is abandoned, and she told me she still mows the lawn here and the house on the other side, which is abandoned as well, and she can't get the city to do something with the property. This lady was one of my favorite encounters on my rock and roll travelogue. Well, back downtown to University City, we're going to learn more about Chuck Berry. Here's a statue, of course, with a guitar in hand. The exhibits take us through Chuck's career from the 1950s through the 1990s. The father of rock and roll, as he is known, was the first inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986. Starting with Rollover Beethoven, later done by the Beatles, Chuck Berry is famous for Johnny B. Good, Sweet Little 16, and he had a number one in 1972 called My Ding-a-Ling. Chuck Berry climbed into the 80s with a nod to the changing landscape of music with the advent of MTV. And here's a mural on Delmar Boulevard down the street at Leland Avenue. Chuck Berry had a hit with a song called No Particular Place to Go. But au contraire, we have more places to go here in St. Louis. Out to 6306 West Florissant, an abandoned building that was once the Club Imperial. The building has been set for demolition more than once, but preservationists have managed to save it to this point. Chuck Berry, of course, played here, but other than Chuck, the most famous performer was a man born in Mississippi, but as a young adult relocated to St. Louis. His name, Ike Turner. His band, the Kings of Rhythm, and the backup vocalists, the Ikettes. They were originally at the Club Manhattan in East St. Louis, Illinois. That's since burned down. But at that club in East St. Louis, he met a woman from Sumner High School. And he met her for the first time. She got up on stage, started singing. The rest is history. Her name, Tina Turner, of course. She'd later marry Ike, 16 tumultuous years of marriage. They would then move to the Club Imperial, and boy, did they rock the joint. River Deep, Mountain High, and of course, Proud Mary are Ike and Tina's two biggest hits together, and they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Previously on Rock and Roll Travelogue, we visited Tina's birthplace in Tennessee and Ike's in Clarksdale, Mississippi. By the way, after Ike and Tina left St. Louis, Club Imperial's house band was Bob Kuban and the In-Men. They had one hit in the mid-'60s. It was called The Cheater. Now keep that in mind. Ironically, the lead singer, Walter Scott, was murdered by his wife's lover years later. Surreal, isn't it? One more visit in St. Louis. We're out to Ferguson, Missouri, a part of Metro St. Louis. We're headed for 930 Airport Road, home of the former Castaway Club. A young student at nearby McClure High School named Michael McDonald played here with his house band. But soon it was off to the West Coast. Michael worked as a session musician, and by 1973 went on the road with Steely Dan's musicians. This gig eventually led to Michael getting a fill-in opportunity with the Doobie Brothers when original lead singer Tom Johnston was absent with health problems. His It Keeps You Running, Taking It to the Streets helped to write a new chapter for the Doobie Brothers, a totally different sound than the early 70s Doobies with Long Train Running, China Grove, and more. Well, time to head back to the home base in Ohio now, but first we make a stop about 90 miles east of St. Louis in Benton, Illinois. Now, this is an old coal mining town of about 6,000 people. And here's the story. In 1963, a British woman born Louise Harrison was married to a man who found work with a coal company with ties to Benton. In the late summer of 1963, Louise invited her brothers from Britain to come visit her. So Peter and George flew to St. Louis and spent time with Louise in Benton and the surrounding area. Well, maybe by now you've probably put it all together. Louise Harrison's brother, George, was a member of a group in England called the Beatles. They were very popular in England, but hardly anyone had ever heard of them in the United States. So this makes George Harrison the first Beatle in America. And here's the marker in the center of Benton. Behind the marker is the Billy Grammer Bandstand. It celebrates the town's Grand Ole Opry members, so a lot of music history in Little Benton. This is Louise's home in Benton. It later became the Hard Day's Night B&B. George would spend time in Benton at the Boneyard Bocce Ball Club. It still stands. at 500 South Wilson. He played with a local band and also traveled about a half an hour to Mount Vernon, Illinois, where he bought a 425 Rickenbacker guitar. And here is the commemorative mural at the Benton Christopher exit off I-57, done by Californian John Cerny. You know, you can get your own mural memorabilia in town if you check with the Chamber of Commerce in Benton, Illinois. Well, all of this in the summer of 1963 happened several months before the Beatles would come to New York and become the biggest of superstars worldwide. George Harrison, the first Beatle in America. Well, it's been lots of fun, but it's been a long day, and I've got to bounce. Until next time on Rock and Roll Travelogue, this is your buddy Bob saying good heart and stout luck.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.